Hello, and welcome to our OU Exploration series. I'm Nicole Floyd, and I'll be your moderator this evening. Tonight, you will hear a presentation by OU faculty member, Dr. Sule. Following the presentation, there will be a question and answer session. To ask a question, we ask that you use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and not the chat feature. You can type your questions at any time and will be answered following the presentation. When we have a presentation with a guest speaker, there is a reminder that we like to give. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Oakland University. Oakland University fully supports the First Amendment. At this time, I would like to introduce your host, Tanya Griffith. Tanya is the Director of Corporate Relations for the Schools of Medicine, Nursing, Health Sciences, and Diversity Initiatives. She has been a member of the Oakland University Advancement Team for 4 years. Tanya has over 20 years of corporate engagement and nonprofit experience and is pursuing a graduate degree in the Masters of Higher Education program, which has a focus on social justice issues. This is also the program that our speaker, Dr. Sule, chairs. Tanya, are you with us?
Thank you, Nicole, for that wonderful introduction. We are excited to have with us today Dr. Thandi Sule. She is an associate professor of higher education and the coordinator of the Masters in Higher Education program here at Oakland University. As a critical race feminist hip hop scholar, her work focuses on educational equity issues, including retention, sense of belonging, and intercultural competencies. Specifically, her work has examined how underrepresented students and faculty contribute to teaching and learning environments on college campuses. Her work is published in several journals, including the Journal of College Student Development, the Journal of Higher Education, Equity and Excellence in Education, Educational Policy, and the International Journal of Qualitative Studies in Education. Now let's hear from Dr. Sule as she shares her work in hip hop, racism, and inclusive spaces.
Thank you for that warm welcome. Hip hop is currently the most popular music genre, so many people are familiar with hip hop through the music. However, hip hop is more than music, it's a culture. Hip hop is a distinct culture grounded in the lived experiences of Black and brown people in New York City during the 1970s. In the midst of urban decay, poverty, displacement, and redlining, young people created a form of entertainment and a vehicle for self-affirmation. However, hip-hop is more than rapping. Hip-hop is storytelling, it is DJing, it's wordplay, it is fashion and style, it is knowledge building, it is community building, it is activism. Essentially, hip-hop is a form of self-expression born in the tension between hardship and creativity. Hip-hop is alchemy. It's about making something beautiful out of very little. The seeds of hip hop were planted long before the 1970s, the decade that gave us hip hop as we know it. Hip hop is a manifestation of Black resilience, of Black people demanding to be heard, of Black people centering themselves, of Black agency as artists and as activists. Hip hop is among a long line of Black creations, from blues, jazz, rock and roll to reggae music, from the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s to the civil rights movement and the Black arts movement of the 1960s. Hip hop is a progeny of these creations. Here is a video clip highlighting hip hop's link to Black cultural traditions. The video shows a 1940s gospel group called the Jubilaires and the pioneering rap group called the Sugar Hill Gang. What you'll see that's similar between the videos is the rhythmic storytelling, and both artists use a similar cadence and flow.
Just come on, brothers, if you want to hear a story about that preacher and the bear. Gather round, boys, I don't want you to miss none of this here story, because it goes like this. A preacher, he went out to hunting. It was on one Sunday morning. Though he was one Christian young man, but he took his gun along.
Now what you hear is not a test, I'm rapping to the beat. And me, the groove, and my friends are gonna try to move your feet. You see, I am Wonder Mike, and I like to say hello. Up to the black, to the white, the red, and the brown, and the purple, and yellow.
So what does hip hop have to do with racism and inclusive spaces in higher education? Let's start with definitions. Racism. Racism is essentially the policies, practices, and behaviors that uphold a social structure that provides advantages for one group and disadvantages other groups. Anti-Black racism. Anti-Black racism is essentially racism that targets Black people, and it stems from the dehumanization of Black people during the enslavement period. Inclusive spaces. This is essentially a sense of belonging, how people feel like they matter in a particular space. Because hip hop is ultimately about storytelling, it's a valuable resource for people who feel silenced. This is because it affirms lived experiences. And for millions of people in this country, racism is a part of their lived experience. So hip hop in and of itself can operate as an inclusive space. Hip hop can also foster cross-racial and cross-cultural engagement. And this is valuable because it's connected to student cognitive and social development. Furthermore, hip-hop culture can serve as a conduit for sense of belonging among all people who are invested in hip-hop culture. Lastly, hip-hop encourages the development of transferable skills that can be applied in the classroom as well as in professional settings. Hip-hop is a platform for self and community affirmation. This is important for students who feel like their lived experiences aren't reflected in the classroom and beyond. My work and the work of others show that hip-hop is associated with sense of belonging as well as well-being. Here is an example of how rap is used to express and affirm lived experiences with struggle, survival, and self-love.
I can't take the smell, can't take the noise. Got no money to move out, I guess I got no choice. Rats in the front room, roaches in the back, junkies in the alley with the baseball bat. I tried to get away, but I couldn't get far, cause a man with a tow truck repossessed my car. Don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head.
Do some good, I felt more damn than Mississippi was. They denied Nina in Philadelphia, and still we persevere like all the 400 years of our own blood. Africa, old Panthers looking back like who gon' come up after us? Outside the movies, I make sure before it move you, it move me. Now bow down to a queen, please. Survival.
Your house, I ain't always have it in me. No tolerance for pretending. I was 14 years old, forcing pills down my throat, so my baby fat diminished. Still got these scars from cutting my wrist when I thought that life was finished. Now they remind me what my lows look like. Now I know the sky's the limit. Okay, never claim to be perfect. That's an impossible dream. I'm just saying that I'm worth it. That's the responsible thing. Spend half my life trying to find my life from outside sources. Why the only voice that mattered came from me.
Additionally, hip hop is a tool that can promote cross-racial knowledge building. As Pakistani rapper Nafis puts it, hip-hop gives you a chance to tell your story, no matter where you came from, and to tell the stories of people who can't tell their stories. Here, Nafis talks about hip-hop being a tool to learn about diverse cultural groups. He also raps about being a Pakistani person post-9/11 in America.
Ask you a question, can you see my frame of reference? I'm checking and guessing, and then I'm constantly stressing because I'm building up tension, knowing I'm trying to blow up. Because the life of a terrorist, yo, is never enough. So I act tough and rap stuff that's asking for help till my mind lies and denies. The tides start to swell on and on until I'm gone and gone, knowing what's wrong is wrong, but I can't move on. So I'm left to wonder, am I the sunrise or sunset? Am I supposed to worship the east or the west, or let the spotlight shine down on me like it was the sun, basking in the neo, preaching that I was the one that could turn our ignorance into bliss? Well, ignorance ain't shit unless you learn from it, because knowledge is power and love is divine, but hate is hellish. So what am I?
Rap then is a tool that provides a degree of intimacy akin to intercultural dialogues. This is because listeners are privy to information typically only known to those within a similar social historical lived experience. Hip-hop naturally facilitates cross-racial interaction. Whether it's through a dance battle, a rap battle, or street art gathering, hip-hop brings people together from different backgrounds. Cross-racial interaction, as you recall, has positive student outcomes. Specifically, cross-cultural acceptance, community service, engagement, and satisfaction with college. Here is an example of cross-racial interaction through dance ciphers.
Come on, kick, 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 come on, come on, kick, kick, come on, kick, 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 come on, come on, kick, kick, come on, kick, 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 come on, come on, come on, kick, kick, come on, kick, kick.
Both of y'all look. Can I do that? Yeah.
come on, kick, 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 come on.
Hip hop culture is associated with sense of belonging, which facilitates persistence to degree and student well-being. Hip hop also serves as an emotional release and can be used in therapeutic settings. Lawrence, an MC and doctoral student at Oakland University, is doing his dissertation work on the intersection of hip hop and Black men's sense of belonging in higher education. Here he shares a few bars about his experience with sense of belonging in higher education settings.
Check the rhythm of my pulse though. My cardio percussion kept my motion through the loco. Underrepresented where conditions less than so-so. Had me uninspired and a little antisocial. I had a hand to help me out. I wasn't solo. Cold climate can wither you. I face it with my bro. Help to balance the melody when I'm stuck in the low notes. Lifting me like telepathy, tethered them to me so close. I made it through another year. Retention has been the mission. I'm planning to persevere. Everybody that love me, I'm glad to gather them near. These counter spaces are lovely. I'd really rather be here. Flash photo to capture me, gift a gap with the flattery. Witty words of panache I deliver with real mastery. Having a lack of comrades would be a catastrophe. I find a tribe that recognize what being Black could be.
In addition to hip hop promoting self-affirmation, cross-cultural knowledge building, cross-racial interaction, and sense of belonging, participation in hip-hop culture can produce and strengthen discrete and transferable skills. Some of these skills include researching, writing, public speaking, self-reflecting, studying, memorizing, marketing, and community engagement, all of which are beneficial to students' academic, social, and professional development. I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation about the role of hip-hop in higher education.
Dr. Sule, how
Anya.
exciting. This is exciting. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here with us today. And thank you so much. Wow, I'm just so excited. I just kind of
want to thank OU Explorations for inviting me to do this. I'm really looking forward to having this dialogue this evening. So let's get into it.
Let's just really go right in. And your work is fascinating. So how did you get into this subject matter? Hip hop, why this genre of music? How did you
I know, right? Okay, let me go back. So all of my work focuses on how marginalized groups access, belong, and transform higher education spaces. And during the latter part of my graduate study and my early faculty career, I found myself really intentionally listening to a lot of hip hop. And then I started to wonder, like, why? Like, I'm really invested in this genre. Not only was I listening to hip hop, I started to get into dance, right? I can show you some moves, right? So, and then I realized that hip hop for me was a form of therapy, right? It was where I found cultural affirmation. It was where I could explore my creativity. It is where I found emotional release, right? So for me, it was like, it was a way out. And then I started to think about how hip hop functioned in higher education spaces, and there wasn't much out there, right? The work that was being done was in K-12. And so I decided to dive in, right? And to think about how hip hop possibly may affect sense of belonging. So that's why I started.
Well, I kind of want to segue into this next question so we can bring this all together, because a part of what you said, it goes into my next question, is because you talk about how hip hop can help with student development in your piece, and it translates into creating highly sought after diverse talent. So why should our viewers, especially those in corporate spaces, care about and invest in this work? And can you talk a little bit more about that?
Okay. So why should our corporate partners care about this work? That's essentially the question.
Right? The community,
or our viewers, or the community.
Yeah, anybody.
Okay, so I'm in higher education. That's my field of study. And in higher education, we want students to be successful, right? That's why we're here, right? But we also know that we don't live in a perfect world. So when students arrive on our campuses, they have to negotiate challenges. And many of those challenges are related to their one of their identity, be it race, gender, class, religion, ability. So what we know in the field of higher education is that students who can find a space where they can be their authentic selves, right? That reality is related to their ability to persist to graduation and to feel satisfied on campus. So for our corporate partners or for our viewers, their investment or their interest in this kind of work, to me, signals that they are committed to student success, one, and also higher education practices that promote inclusion. But also, and this is really important, I see it as an opportunity for us to collaborate, right? And so I'm thinking about this. There's this project called the Hip Hop Institute of Entrepreneurship. It was a grant-funded program. I don't think it's in its existence anymore, but essentially they use the fundamentals of hip hop to teach business and entrepreneurship to participants. So I envision having those types of collaborations, right? And so what I'm saying is that in hip hop, you can find a diversity of talent. And you saw that in the video that I mentioned, that we just watched. So for instance, if you think about an MC, right? What comes to mind is someone who can write, someone who is a public speaker, someone who may be into research, someone who's good at persuading, someone who can improvise. When you think about a street artist, what comes to mind is branding, visual storytelling, community education, right? Even if you're talking about a party promoter, right? So you have to identify, right, and recruit talent. You have to engage in some type of event planning. You have to know something about budgeting and pricing. So it comes with like a lot of talent that is untapped, right? So that is the lesson. That is the lesson here for me, is that one, we're supporting student success, and also we are sort of segueing into a conversation about how we can collaborate to enrich the talent pipeline. So that's why we should all care.
I love how you made that correlation, because a lot of people don't see that. So can you explain?
Wait, you know what? And I wanted to mention that we already see this, right?
Yeah.
We've already seen it, because we have Queen Latifah. Started off as a rapper, started her own production company. At one point was a talk show host, right? We have Jay-Z and Sean Combs, and will.i.am now has a tech company. So they were able to take what they learned in hip hop culture and transfer it into other industries. And we should be a part of that, right? Because there's a lot of untapped talent there.
I
just want to throw that out there.
Okay. No, I love how you putting this in terms that everyone can really understand. Your space that you're talking about and your work at Oakland University. Could you explain to us what that is, and in layman's terms, what does that mean? Paint a picture of for people like me who don't understand a lot of academia, right? Yeah. So tell me, what is this space?
7:20 p.m. with a current
temperature
of 50.
Now I'm gonna get an F. I promise my phone is off. I have some random alarm. So paint a picture of the space. Yes. Okay. So in my mind, this is what I see, right? And I'm basing it on the elements of hip hop, right? So I envision like a large space. One part of that space will be the MC, DJ space, right? Another part of the space would be the street art space. And that street art space can encompass the entire unit, right? But let's say there's a street art space, and then another part of it would be a studio. A dance studio, but in the center, that would be the community space. That's what I see as the ciphering space. So in a cipher, if you're not familiar with, is where everybody gets a chance to participate and share their talent. So in that workshop space, so let me go back. So this means that people who have an interest, or students who have an interest in hip hop, can come to this space and practice their craft. Right. And they also have an opportunity to participate in workshops that are rooted in the fundamentals of hip hop culture. Right. So and the workshops could be anything from mental health issues to financial literacy to STEM careers, all grounded in the principles of hip hop culture. So just off the top, that's kind of the space that I envision.
Okay, and so that encompasses pretty much every major, and that's something that
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because typically when we talk about counter spaces or subculture within higher education, we're talking about a space for a singular identity group, right? Usually a race or gender, and these groups typically feel marginalized within the full space. So they have a safe space to go. What's unique about this space is that because of the reach of hip hop culture, it brings in everybody, right? Race, gender, class, everybody's there. So it's organically diverse, right? So that's the special thing about this kind of counter space.
I love that organically diverse picture that you just painted for us. Now, I'm coming from the space of corporate, right? So I've been in corporate for a very long time. So I hear the conversation. So in corporate America, a lot of companies are using hip hop to brand, right? So there are examples include what's happening right now with McDonald's and Sweetie, right? She's selling the Sweetie meals and the Sweetie sauce, and then you have Popeyes with Megan the Stallion. So, and the list goes on. So as a corporate partner, I want to get in on the ground floor and getting those students, getting that talent, getting that, you want to make sure that translates into the workspace. So how can we get involved on the ground floor with your work?
On the ground floor, okay.
Yeah, and building this space. And what does that look like exactly from the business aspect?
Okay, so I'm an educator.
Yes.
We're corporate, I'm an educator. So I would say the first thing for me is to educate yourself a little bit more about hip hop culture, right? So that there's a certain level of comfort, because we don't want to be in a position where we're putting something together that's superficial or that is perceived to be cultural appropriation. And that's really easy. The education part is really easy because there's so much out there, right? Actually, there's a really good documentary series on Netflix called The Evolution of Hip Hop. Very well done documentary series. But there's tons out there. There are books. So that's the first step. Then the second step would be, once you're familiar, you kind of understand hip hop, is to kind of think about how what you do intersects with hip hop, right? But I'm taking it up another level, right? Not only does it intersect with hip hop, but you're also going to be thinking about the public good, right? So it's not just about selling hot sauce, hottie sauce, sorry. but you're taking it, you're going the extra mile. And this, there was this project that J. Cole, if you're not familiar with J. Cole is one of the hottest rappers out now. He partnered with Apple Music and the Marcus Graham Project. And that partnership was designed to address the lack of diversity in marketing and media advertising. So the awardees of this project participated in an internship program. They called it like a boot camp internship program, where they got to work on a campaign either for Jay-Z or Apple, right? So that's a way that you can partner with hip hop culture for the public good. And so that's where we would start, to think about what these corporations or entities can bring to us and what we can bring to them. And again, it's all about enriching and developing the talent pipeline.
And I'm so glad you said that, because what I think what will happen with your project is the corporate partners with the cultural appropriation pieces. That's a sticky subject, right? So have those discussions with you in your work and understand
exactly
the why, because at the end of the day, it hurt their brand when they're trying to be an ally when it's actually hurting.
Exactly. Yeah. So with the education piece, where you're finding the connection between what you're doing in hip hop culture, and then you're kind of putting this public good at the forefront, then you avoid that. So not only will you be perceived as an ally, but also, because of that, your business, people want to invest in you. How many times have you said, you know what, I'm going to support that business because of such and such, because they supported this cause, right? We've all done it. So, yeah.
I love this project. So I want to kind of go back to making sure we're on task, on target with the academic part, because we want to make sure those two are infused: business, the corporate, the community, and academic. So in your work, you shared that hip hop is a proven teaching tool. So can you give us some examples? And you talked a little bit about STEM, but I kind of want you to kind of pull that out a little bit more and talk a little bit more about what you meant by students being able to learn more, and hip hop is a teaching tool.
Okay. So I define myself as a critical race hip hop scholar, right? So I guess I have to back it up. So I would say in all of my years of teaching here at OU, I've used hip hop pedagogy. So what is hip hop pedagogy then, right?
Okay.
So I'll just talk about a couple of the tenets of that. So one is transdisciplinary. And that essentially means that if you are teaching something, you don't have to stick with one discipline, right? So if I'm teaching a math problem, which I'm not, but if I was teaching a math problem, I could draw from art, I can draw from dance, I can draw from sociology, I can draw from English, and then I create a whole new way of teaching. And guess where this comes from, Tanya? I know you know. Where does this come from in hip hop? So sampling, right? So sampling is when you borrow beats from different songs, like all kinds of genres, and you create a whole new beat, right? Yes. So yes. that's where that comes from. Yes. And then hip hop is participatory, right? So in my classes, students are expected to be active agents in their own knowledge development. So dialogue is central, right? Because I view students as coming into that space with some agency, and they have something to share, and we can learn from each other. Okay. Hip hop is also about cross-cultural relevance cultural relevance, and as well as being like culturally responsive, right? And for me, that means that not only do we affirm the experiences of marginalized people, but we also utilize it in the classroom. And an easy way to do that is with your syllabus, right? So when you look at your syllabus, is it inclusive? The topics that are being discussed, the readings that you're asking students to know, the guest speakers that you're inviting in, the language that you're using in your syllabus, is that inclusive? What else? So hip hop is about storytelling. What's the story, right? What story is being told? How is it being told, and why? And then finally, I would say hip hop is about action, right? So, hip hop, the beginning of it, was really innovative. People were moving, creating, progressing, but they're doing it for a reason, right? So it's not art for art's sake. So I think that, if you have these tenets or these principles in place, then you're engaging in hip hop pedagogy, right? And hip hop pedagogy, to me, is pedagogy that's going to facilitate not only a sense of belonging for all students, but it's going to promote cognitive development based on the research on diversity, right? And in regard to STEM, specifically, what comes to mind is the project, Science Genius Project, that's been out for a while. It's a project out of New York. And essentially, they use hip hop, primarily rap, to teach people about science. And it's been pretty successful. So something like that can be replicated at OU.
So Dr. Sule, before we move to our next question, our next portion of the discussion tonight, could you provide some clarity? You use a few words that I want to make sure our audience as we're having a conversation. You talked about agency. Students have agency. A couple of things, and you talked about pedagogy. What is that? What are those?
Okay, pedagogy is the science of teaching. Basically, what you do in the classroom. How do you teach, right? And then agency is the power, like the internal reserves or resources that people have to make things happen, right? So to me, when I talk about agency, I'm talking about the ability for someone to actually understand what they want to do and actually do it.
And essentially that's hip hop, right?
Essentially that's hip hop. It all comes back. Everything comes back to hip hop, right?
Everything comes back to hip hop. I do think we have time for one more question.
Okay.
Kind of dive. You touched a little bit about principles in your previous answer. So how can everyone apply these principles that hip hop inclusive spaces provides, whether it's in their business, whether it's in their everyday living, and what benefits might they hope to see from applying these principles?
Okay.
Did I stump
How
you?
can everyone apply? I want to just say apply them. I think we have to start with, okay, if you want to apply these principles, I think we could start with the importance of having critical conversations, right?
Okay.
You have to be willing to have critical conversations because it's particularly if we're talking about inclusive spaces. So you have to be willing to have critical conversations about dominant and non-dominant identities and what that means in terms of access to resources. You have to be willing to do the work because, talking about inclusion, talking about issues of, inclusion period can be uncomfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then two, that was two. Was that two? Three.
Okay.
What did I say? You have to have critical conversations. You have to be willing to do the work. And then I think you have to invest in resources or people to help you do that work, right?
Okay.
So that is definitely part of it. So if you're really serious about it, you have to invest. You have to invest in it. And when I say invest in it, it's not just like superficial investment, putting up pictures, bringing in a guest speaker. I'm talking about something like a workshop series, right? Where people, and we're going back to that active engagement, right? Because once we, as opposed to like a guest speaker or a panel discussion, workshops, for me, encourages people to be actively involved and actively engaged in their own knowledge development. So I would seriously think about how how entities can put things together where people are actively engaged in learning not only about hip hop, but how hip hop connects to inclusion and how that matters for the work that they do. I don't know. I hope I answered your question.
You did. And we're going to hear more from you as we segue into our next section. And we can, after this clip, we'll have more conversation.
Okay.
We'll hear
Sounds
more
good.
from you like.
There are 3 key ways that Oakland University can strategically employ hip hop. Oakland University supports inclusive spaces and is committed to student sense of belonging. However, we are always looking for more ways to engage students. With the knowledge of the therapeutic benefits of hip hop, we are working towards a dedicated hip hop classroom studio space. This dedicated space would include a recording, dance, and art studio to give students a creative outlet for their self-expression. We'll also provide personal development workshops based on student needs, and will also help students intentionally employ hip hop as a tool for self-development. Relatedly, because we know that cross-racial interaction is associated with students' social and cognitive development, we are exploring more opportunities to promote cross-racial interaction through student programming and leadership opportunities that centers hip hop. Because hip hop is proven to be an effective teaching tool, it is more imperative than ever before that we multiply occasions for educators to expand their instructional toolkit through a workshop series on how to effectively use and respect hip hop in the classroom and beyond. This is a video by Erykah Badu. It's entitled The Healer, and it exemplifies the global impact of hip hop culture. It also serves as an example of hip hop culture beyond what you might hear on the radio. I hope you enjoy this video, and I look forward to our conversation.
Alhamdulillah, Allah, Jehovah, Yahweh, Dios, Ma'atcha, Rastafari, fire, dance, sex, music, hip hop is bigger than religion. Hip hop is bigger than my hip hop is bigger than the government. This one is the healer hip
So, Dr. Sule, we have some exciting questions from the audience. A lot of questions from the audience. Are you ready?
Yes, I was looking at the questions and I was like, let me start writing down some answers.
Well, let's just dive right in because we don't have a lot of time.
Okay.
So, Caress, I want to mention the name, Caress Dean. She congratulated you on your award and your presentation. So she wants to know, in your opinion, do you feel the genre of hip hop has changed over the years? And I'll add to that, Gen X and Gen Z hip hop is very different. So let's kind of lump that into that question.
Okay. Okay. I think that the basics, the essence of hip hop is still there, right? I think that in terms, the essence, the beat, the break beats, we can have a conversation about the lyrical piece, but there are definitely words, right? So I would say that we have much more diversity now. And I think that at one point, hip hop was perceived to be just a culture or just a type of music for people under 25. Now we have Jay-Z, Kanye, and other people who are still producing music, still part of the hip hop culture, and that's seen as okay. But at one point, if you were 26 and you're trying to rap or do something, people looked at you like you were crazy, right? Right. So I think that we have much more diversity in the type of music, in terms of hip hop music, but also in how hip hop is expressed, because people have grown up. I'm grown up. I'm a professor, right? So I bring hip hop into academia, right? You bring hip hop into corporate. So we're bringing hip hop into the spaces where we work, right? Our workspaces. So I think that's the beauty of hip hop, because we're changing these spaces. Like I remember do you watch like fashion shows? Mm-hmm. You see how some of people?
I do.
I'm like, okay, this is different. Like we are changing how people show up, right? So I think, when we say hip hop is the most influential cultural movement in the past 50 years, it's everywhere, right? So I know I really haven't answered your question, but indirectly, I'm saying that there's something for everybody. Basically, that's what I'm saying. And in terms of, I would probably say the biggest difference though, would be the lyrical piece, right? But I still have hope, right? Because we have people like Corday. We have I'm trying to think of the Z generation, Joey Badass, right? Yeah. We have I would put Megan in there. She got some bars. She got bars.
She got bars,
not mumbling, that's for sure.
That's Gen Z.
Right. So I would definitely say that would probably be the biggest difference, but there's still lyrical people. Baby King, right? Oh. Baby King is a lyricist, right? So I think what we're seeing is that SoundCloud rappers is more rhythmic, people are vibing, and that's okay. But then we also, as long as we don't lose the lyrical piece, which is the mainstay of hip hop, the DJ is important. We started with the DJ, but hip hop wouldn't be where we are now if it wasn't for the lyrics and for the rappers and the MC, because that's how we went global, because those stories meant something and they mean something to people.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm about to touch on a subject, and I'm hoping we have time for you to answer this. So for the clarity of the audience, someone wants you to explain and discuss the intersection of critical race theory, and you are the expert, and hip hop education culture. This is a great question.
I mean, to me, I think everything that I talked about is CRT. Right?
Yes.
Okay. So when I say I'm a critical race hip hop scholar, what I typically say after that is that means that I look at the intersection of race, gender, and class and how they matter in higher education spaces, right? So when I talk about hip hop being culturally relevant and culturally responsive, that's part of CRT, right? Mm-hmm. When I talk about hip hop being participatory, that is about affirming the lived experiences of people. Actually, the thing about hip hop, and the reason why I added hip hop to like my little title is because the thing about hip hop, and we were just talking about this, it's the stories, right? It taught me as a young person that my story mattered, right? That I mattered, right? And I didn't have to be a superstar. I didn't have to be rich. I didn't have to grow up in a particular neighborhood. That to me is the intersection, is the fact that we are affirming the lived experiences of people who have been historically silent. And that is the essence of critical race theory, right? Did I hope I answered your question, Berkeley? Is that Berkeley? I was not there anymore.
So I have a question, is how much of an effect do you think violence is putting on hip hop and our young hip hop fans?
How much of an effect that violence is putting on hip hop, or hip hop is
and our young fans? They said both.
How does hip hop?
It's gone, but it's hip hop.
Oh, it's gone. Okay, can you say the question one more time?
How much of an effect do you think that violence is putting on the reputation of hip hop? Is what I believe. Reputation of hip hop and the young fans. We just had someone murdered in hip hop today.
Okay. Oh, you mean all of them? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big question, because I think that hip hop is intertwined with, street culture, and intertwined with America is a gun culture, right? Yeah. We love our guns in this country. So I think that it is, despite the fact that this was considered a subculture, now it's a part of mainstream culture. We all live in America, and gun culture is part of who we are, right? So I think it's bigger than hip hop, but it's definitely a part of hip hop. So I don't think, I think that because of hip hop's influence, I think it does play a role, but I think that it's not singular. I think that it's connected to all the stuff that's happening in our culture, because we do live in a gun and violence obsessed culture.
Exactly. Okay, so I have a question for you and I. Top 5 hip hop songs of all time, not artists, songs.
Okay.
Songs.
I did write this down. Because it's like 1,000 songs.
And why? You have to say
and why, right?
You have to say why.
Okay, so my first one is going to be Dead Prez.
Okay.
Right? It's bigger than hip hop, because every time I hear that bass line, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So if you don't know, Dead Prez is bigger than hip hop, and also the message about hip hop, like what hip hop is about. That was during the time, I think that came out early 2000s or something like that. That was during the time when they were. It was a commentary on the commercialization of hip hop. Right, folks were becoming millionaires, and hip hop was changing, and you weren't really seeing a diversity like played on MTV or BET or on your radio. So there was a conversation about that. Everybody had jewels and chains and stuff like that.
Right.
So, you want me to go down, straight down? Okay. Okay, Lauryn Hill, because I got to put Lauryn Hill there, right?
Of course.
I got to put Lauryn Hill, so I put doo-wop. Lauryn Hill, just because there's a singing and rapping, this is perfect.
I get it.
And the melodies, like you can't beat that. Pete Rock and CL Smooth, I just had to give it to them, because when they reminisce over you, that's like a cookout song. That makes me feel like home and family. And it's just a nice song about family and love. And it was like a huge hit, right? And then Kendrick Lamar.
I put that in there. A whole Pimp a Butterfly album.
But guess what? I went back to Section 80. Okay. I went to High Power. Okay. That's it for me. That's like a love letter to Black people to me, right? And then Princess Nokia. I love Princess Nokia, and she has a song called Bruja, and it's about being an Afro-Latina and culture, and I just love that song. So I try to make
sure our viewing audience has your list, your top 5.
Okay. Listen, I had to narrow it down. I had like so many songs.
I know. I get it. My list is short. Cream by Wu-Tang.
Okay.
Everything Around Me. Yes. Brown Sugar, Most Def. Fight the Power by Public Enemy. You have to.
You know what? I was trying to. I forgot.
Born to Roll by Master Ace, and The Story of OJ. You have to put the
Oh, yeah. That's a nice one. I can see that. I can see that.
Okay,
All right.
let's go back to our audience questions again. We have so many. Someone asked, Michelle asked, you list ye or yay in your pronouns. What does that mean?
Oh, yay means he or she. And I love it because it's Kiswahili, right? And a long time ago, I studied Kiswahili. I think it's a beautiful language. And I like the fact that it's a gender neutral term, but it encompasses both or any gender, right?
Mm-hmm. Love that. So next question. The retention of underrepresented minorities in higher education can be pretty terrible, particularly recently. It's clear your expertise and research lies in belonging and inclusion, which can make a tremendous impact on the underrepresented minority population. Is your research and expertise received well by the leadership of Oakland University?
Well, thank God I do have tenure. Somebody said.
You are tenured, so have at it.
You know what I just remembered as I was listening to the presentation is that initial grant to do the work on hip hop came from OU. So I received a $10,000 grant. So without that grant, I would have still attempted to do the work, but I remember being really nervous about presenting it and thought that people would just laugh me out of whatever OU, but it was supported. So I would definitely thank OU for that support, and I just forged ahead. The dean at the time, I remember sharing my research interests with the dean, and he was very supportive. So thus far I've only received support, even if people don't know what I'm doing. They're just like.
Okay. We want to ask, okay, here's another one. I teach creative nonfiction classes. So I teach storytelling, and I'm wondering, I'm wondering as a hip hop pedagogist, how do you recommend I respond to student work? What's your approach to helping storytellers improve and to help them write culturally relevant stories while affirming and supporting their voices and agency? So this is directly hip hop. So I can't wait to hear your answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's based on, it's not just responding to a singular student, but it's based on how the class is set up. So if you, hopefully your class is highly dialogical, because that's when they get that practice of listening to the lived experiences of other people in the class, and they are held accountable for whatever comments they make in class. So it's sort of like a give and take. So you're learning as you're participating in this cipher, right, experience. You're putting something in and you're hopefully taking something out. So I think it starts with how you set up your class, the readings that you select, and I forgot the other parts of the question, but I'm more than happy if you email me, we can have a conversation, we can sit down and have coffee or tea and talk about some of the things that I do in the classroom.
Love it. So Dr. Sule, your work, we're asking people in the audience to support, what we're doing, to take a different view of what hip hop looks like and how they incorporate hip hop in inclusive spaces. What can our audience walk away with, and what are you hoping that they can walk away with in terms of action items, in terms of what's our next steps, or how can they be included with this?
Woo.
We have 10 minutes or 9 minutes. So
I think one of the things I want people to leave with is the knowledge that hip hop is a culture, and it's not just a song, and it's a culture that is rich. It's like 50 years deep, right? And within that culture, there's a diverse pool of talent, right, that remains untapped, right? And I want us to think about how we can work within the culture, support the culture, and use hip hop to nurture the next generation of whatever. It could be business, medicine, science, whatever. How can we use hip hop to speak to the next generation of students, the next generation period, because this is what captivates them. This is what they're interested in, right? When we say hip hop is the biggest music genre, when we, I mean, not even just quote unquote young people, right? We already talked about how long hip hop has been out. Like, I'm thinking about Hamilton.
Right.
A 2.5 hour play.
Right.
20,000 words. 20,000 words in that play. People sat for 2.5 hours and it broke box office record. Right.
Amazing.
So hip hop, we need to pay attention to it because everybody else is paying attention to it, right? And we need to figure out how we can utilize it in a way that is reflective of the culture, pays homage to the culture, and brings the culture along with us, right? So we're not being vultures. We're a part of the conversation.
We are a part of the conversation. I love that. So your project is coming up. What, you have projects coming up, or do you want to share?
I always have projects coming up.
What's your...
I have a book project coming up. It's a co-edited book on Black women's epistemology. It is with Krista Porter and Natasha Kroom. So that project is coming up. I have a few articles that I'm working on, mostly researchy stuff, but that's like a major project that's coming up that I'm really excited about, that we just kind of almost wrapped up.
Well, I thank you. We thank you. You've been an amazing speaker, and thank you for being my professor. I have really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, I wanted to mention something. I know we're running out of time, but this is the first annual National Hip Hop History Month. Apparently a resolution was passed over the summer in Congress, and this is, November 2021 is the first annual National Hip Hop History Month. So wow. Happy chance that we just happen to have this session.
I mean, how prophetic is this to happen now?
So to me, that's the impact. I mean, that's the impact of hip hop, is that people at the very least are starting to recognize how important it's been for our culture.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that nugget. Thank you so much to everyone. And now